Hey everybody, it's Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget. Hello, you sound very perky, Adrian.
I always do that when I'm not. No, I'm all right. It's been a we a while ago decided we were going to slow down and not do so much stuff, but life doesn't kind of treat you like that, or whether it's us, I don't know. But everything that happens to us has many good things in it, and some things that aren't so good. Last weekend, well, a lot of things. Last weekend we had a in many ways a great weekend with people at Scargill House in Yorkshire, and there were one or two things that arose from that made me think. Not that people said there, but arose from the weekend really.
Well, just to explain, I mean, one of the fascinating things about this particular weekend is that it is a group, and yet it isn't. In other words, it's ACW, which is the Association of Christian Writers, and they're writers who are Christians, but they don't automatically, although some do, write Christian things. But everything that they do, whether it's to do with workbooks for work, I mean, one person working with autistic children, some people who are ministers working through that sort of thing, some people writing manuals that are completely different, some people writing fiction. I mean, that's just for starters.
And some people who've hardly
poetry.
ever written anything.
I was just going to say, some people who like the idea of writing, some people who are published by publishers, some people who are self-published because they want to, some people who are self-published because they didn't want to but didn't get as far as being published. A wonderful mix of people, but all of their writing laced with a knowledge that they wanted it to reflect something.
You've just used that word lace because you read it on the Christmas pudding that you had in front of you.
All right.
Anyway,
I have a Christmas pudding in front of me.
No, that's right. Anyway,
I have a Christmas pudding in front of me because there was one left over from a lot of other things, and I was fascinated by the fact that it was apparently laced with rum, brandy and sherry, and I discovered 1% of each of them, which makes up to 3% of a very large pudding. So hence the word laced.
Okay.
Right.
Well, after that fascinating little interlude. No, that's true. It is interesting. And one of the interesting things about a writer's thing is that those who haven't encountered it before kind of, I think, anticipate that there'll be very kind of mild librarian type. Sorry, librarians, it's probably a gross insult. Very quiet. Yes, very mild person. No, she's not. But there is a feeling that perhaps people will be kind of studious and wrapped up in it all. Well, that may be so for some, but it's certainly not overall. I mean, we have some people in our group who are incredibly clever and creative, and very lively.
I think for me, one of the things that surprised me the first time I was part of such a disparate group of people, all with one thing in common, was that they might be quite competitive, but actually the support and understanding. And you've seen it with things like athletics, haven't you? Where you know that they're going to have to be unbelievably competitive on one level, but they understand the fine margins of doing what they do.
It's interesting in anything where the margins of success are so tiny, people understand each other much more or seem to support each other in a different way. But this weekend, as usual, was very hard work and a lot going on, and it's wonderful talking to people and hearing what people say, but something did present itself to me as a result of the weekend, and it's not new, far from it, but I think it was in the service we had on Sunday, and we were talking about fear, which everybody obviously experiences from time to time, and that verse from the New Testament, perfect love casts out fear. And it just set me thinking about how something good can turn into an obstacle, something you trip over if you're not careful. And some of the things that are said in the New Testament are like that, and I think this is one of them. That if you simply take those words, because I think it goes on to say, actually, that if you still fear, you're not of God, or something like that. Well, obviously you have to look at the context, but quite often people don't. And when you hear a thunderous thing like perfect love casts out fear, and you're still living with fear, maybe it's perhaps a neurotic part of your makeup, or it might be that there are certain things that bring dread into your life when they happen. But there is a strata of some kinds of churches where it's easier to simply say, there you are, look, you see, if you're still fearing, there's something wrong with your faith. It isn't it's an insult to God, I think, to assume that the only way in which it can be dealt with is for you to go around saying, are you afraid? Are you afraid? No, yes, good, no, bad. It's not like that, is it? And there are other bits and pieces in the New Testament that could also have that effect.
Yeah, I mean, I do appreciate what you're saying. I mean, the thing that I love, and you're talking about the church, is that imperfect love over a long period of time does help to cast out a certain amount of fear in a lot of people, so that they feel safe, they feel able to talk about the things that are really going on in them. So that's slightly different, but there is one of the it's probably not modern anymore, because I think it's been around a while, but No Longer a Slave to Fear is one of the songs we do sing in church that I like very much, because it's not saying no longer afraid, it's saying it's not going to be the thing that enslaves me, because I know, even though I'm not actually feeling it at the moment, that I am loved. And I suppose that for some people, we know jolly well, takes a lifetime.
Yeah, it does. But I looked it up today. I occasionally look at little commentaries, and I only very quickly looked at something, and it started to talk about all the places where Jesus talks about anxiety and worry, or somebody in the New Testament does. It just took me back for a moment to the the day we were sitting in church one day next to a friend of ours who was buying some kitchen implement, like a washing machine or something, on what they used to call HP.
They did, didn't they?
Hire purchase.
Absolutely. I haven't. It's just a source.
That's right. Yeah.
That I know.
A source.
In the UK, we have a source. HP source. Sorry, I don't.
So the lady next to us had such a thing, and the person preaching was saying that you shouldn't buy things like that. You should only buy things that you could afford.
Well, you shouldn't allow yourself to be in debt. That was the thing.
I suppose so. He was just saying he was saying you shouldn't take it on.
Yeah.
And of course he had a mortgage. Well, I mean, that's a vast expense to outlay in terms of borrowing. But it's so easy. And I remember her moving in the chair next to me, as people do sometimes, and whispering in my ear, I've got a whatever it was, and I'm paying on HP.
I mean, things have changed so much. I mean, in our world right now, it is perfectly reasonable, isn't it? It's suggested by just about everything that you buy that you can buy now, pay later, that you can work out a way of doing that, either with interest or with... It's much more respectable than it was when you were talking about it.
No, it is. There are very good ways to handle that now. I'm aware of that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that if you pluck bits of scripture out and hit people with them, it's really unfair. And even some of the things that Jesus says, for instance, where he says, you'll come to me and I'll say, I never knew you. We're so used to saying, Jesus wants you, Jesus loves you, just come to Jesus. And here is Jesus saying, you'll tell me you cast out demons and you did this and you did that, and I'll say to you, I never knew you. You could go home very unhappy if you'd heard that, those words being read. But
the idea that you never met him, You never knew him. He never knew you. He never met you. He never was allowed to come close to you when everything was messed up. You know, I've always thought that's what that meant. I don't know who you are. You've followed a law. You've followed a way of life that is so far away from me that I don't know who you are. That's what I thought it was about.
It just
really.
occurred to me.
I mean, as soon as you say it like that, I never knew you. It's you know, I don't like you, but I don't think it's like that. I think if you've never known him, you don't know him. You don't know the heart. You don't know the unbelievable compassion in the heart of Jesus. We had an email this week, didn't we, from somebody who said that for her there were massive problems in the way the church looks at the whole new issues that confront the church to do with gender. And she said that she felt that one day God said to her, "You may think you love them, but you don't love them this is my paraphrase, but you don't love them anything like as much as I love them." And suddenly, seeing it through those eyes, a lot of her fear that she wasn't on God's side by not having a firm decision about what she should feel, suddenly that didn't matter as much, and she would just get on with loving them and leave the...
That's right. She'd been wanting to have God's stance on that.
Exactly, as a lot of us do. We don't want to let God down. We feel we ought to know what he would think. And that jerked her into realising that what mattered most was getting on with the job of loving.
Just quickly going back, I just realised I might have got that quote wrong. It might be that he says, well, no, it's an interesting difference, because maybe that he says, "You never knew me." So that kind of turns the whole thing around.
No, I think he does say, "I never knew you," but I've taken that to mean, I never got to know you.
Well, certainly he would have to say, wouldn't he, "I never knew you," in the context of making people believe you were representing me when actually you weren't. And those are the people who will say, "Surely we're okay because we did all this in your name." And he's saying, well, you actually didn't. The trouble is, you never get the nuanced tones in the New Testament or in the Bible. It's not a place where those are readily accessible, is it? Anyway, what have you been thinking about this week? I'm rabbiting on about that.
Well, no, I mean, one of the things about this weekend, just to explain very briefly, the way these particular weekends work is that after talking a while, we offer one or two ideas for people to go away and write. And the joy of these weekends is listening to what people have written. People from, as we said, published writers, poets, whatever, down to people who've never ever written and certainly never read it out aloud.
Those Saturday evenings are amazing.
They're a real joy, they are. Well, one of the triggers was just an idea, really, walking into a room of strangers, because we know that a lot of writers have to take something close to their hearts and offer it to people who might, whether it's their readers or publishers or whatever, who may love it, may love them, may reject them and whatever. And for the fiction writers, they have to walk into a room of strangers, in other words, the characters that they're creating. And one by one, the people who were fiction writers were talking about the need to listen to their characters, to hear what their character is saying and in what tone of voice they're using, and not just what they look like, but who were they? And I know that is something that you've explored, especially in The Shadow Doctor.
Yeah, that's right. Well, certainly writing the character of the Shadow Doctor in those two books, I have to listen for his voice to hear how he would answer a question or deal with the situation. And it all sounds a bit airy-fairy, but I think when you've worked for some time with a character, there's an odd detachment occurs, and you really have to listen. Perhaps it's your memories and your understanding just reappearing in your mind. I don't know, but occasionally I'm quite surprised at what
they might say.
He does or says, Yeah.
Yes, and I suppose what I've been thinking since is that we all walk into rooms of strangers, even the people who are in the same church as us. Do we really know what they're thinking? Do we really know what's going on? And it's only by listening and by, like this person who wrote to us this week and said, you know, it turned her thinking upside down. Not what judgment would God put on these people, and therefore I need to tune into that, but tune into the love of God, and therefore a compassion, and therefore needing to understand where somebody's coming from. And I just found that so interesting the more I thought about it, really. The way, as you said, you needed to listen and get the nuance, get the train of thought that this character might have, albeit fictional. And think about what we need to do is listening, really listening to people we might think we know.
Yeah.
Or people we're happy to go along with the surface of. You know, we could describe what they look like. We could describe some of the things they might say, you know, their catchphrases, their little things they say, the way they look, the way they walk, but actually to really understand involves listening. I was thinking about Paul, I mean, one of your favourite heroes of the Bible, and the fact that we're told that at times he stayed in a place for a very long time and must have done a lot of listening as well as talking.
Which we don't have a much record of those long periods, do we, on the whole? But we know he was there arguing, talking, listening, mixing for years.
Yes, and therefore, when he does finally make his mark, he knows, I mean, you know, like the altar to the unknown God.
Yeah.
He knew these people because he understood these people, and he knew what would be the right thing for them.
Yeah. Yeah, he knew what would get them.
He knew what would get them.
Yeah.
But he didn't start from plunging in thinking, I know what would get them. No. He listened to them. He caught where they were. He walked into a room of strangers.
I tried to sort of look at this in one of the limericks I wrote. I haven't got it here, but it doesn't matter. It's Peter looking back at Jesus and saying something like, "It's the carpentry background that did it." You know, I was trying to suggest that you only had to forgive people 7 times, and that the heavenly gavel went down on about 3,000,003 because Jesus had mixed with people you had to watch, because in trade you're always dealing with people, and of course the stories Jesus told, which were so relevant to the people in the places where he told them, were because he'd been with people, listened to people, knew how they worked, and that can be obscured by the suggestion that, you know, the Holy Spirit was there and therefore he only had to listen to God. But it's clear, I think it would be clear to anyone who tells stories a lot, that those stories have arisen from a very real knowledge of real people.
A real familiarity with his audience, if you like. Fine-tuning. And you've often said you think he probably told most of his stories more than once, especially as you get slightly different versions of them. And we know that the people were trundling around the edge of Galilee to try to listen to him. But yes, knowing them, having listened to them. They're not just plonking what God says is, but telling a story that involves them. I mean, we always loved the fact, didn't we, that the Good Samaritan starts with a man went down the road from here to wherever, and there would have been a gasp of recognition because everybody knew that road. Nobody would go down that road. They knew what would happen to them. So he's caught them.
That's right, Yeah, I was thinking about something else that he said that really chimed into that, about the listening to people. I mean, we do quite a bit of one-to-one stuff with people.
I guess we do.
And one of the things that I think we've learned is that as soon as you sit with somebody who you don't know, perhaps, or even if you do think you know, you have a. This is going to sound wrong to some people. I think you have a responsibility to put your agenda on a shelf and leave it there, because you want to be the one who receives from them, not what they should say or what they shouldn't say, which you can correct, but to genuinely hear them. Because in 40 years, one of the most powerful things I've known is for people to be heard.
Yes, I quite agree. And the other flip side of that, Adrian, is that I've quite often felt incredibly nervous. But somehow, when the love of God is coming through, and when you realise that here is somebody who needs to be heard, then your fear goes, and you just want to take some tiny fragment of the perfect love into that situation, and your fear goes. It doesn't seem such a big deal.
It can seem very difficult, because if people have.
I'm not saying it's not easy, but I'm just saying that things get flipped around.
Yeah, they do.
And
they do,
your nervousness can easily, and I know we meet people all the time who would nod their heads at that, who are giving out in the most difficult of situations, but find that when it actually comes to the crunch, wanting to take the love of God is bigger than the fear they have. I suppose that's what I mean, really. It doesn't cast it out.
No, I would say to people that it's one of the most liberating things I've known.
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
You go down the road to meet a prodigal.
Yeah.
You can't meet him where he isn't.
No.
Or her where she isn't.
No.
You have to meet them where they are.
Yes.
You're not going down there to make them be where they should be.
No.
You're going down
neither
there.
are you standing where you want to be and waiting for them to come to you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's certainly helped me in the past.
Yeah. And I hope, yeah. So,
and
I know there'll be people listening to this who will have had experience one way or the other, and it would be really lovely to hear from you.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, anything you want to comment on, we'd love to hear from you. As usual. Bye-bye.